Welcome back, everyone. I'm joined here with Terance again, Coach Blue, and we're going to be talking about forgiveness. And as far as the outline of this podcast goes, um, it's going to be kind of a free talk. We sat down last night and went over some topics along the lines of forgiveness to make sure that we had it mapped out the way that we wanted to while we're talking. And we came down. We went into pretty good detail about it. We have a pretty good layout, but what I want it to be is more, we're still going to be asking each other questions and trying to figure it out along the way. So there are some rooms for genuine talk throughout, and that's what I really want it to be. So we're going to be going off of this little layout that I have, and hopefully we have more questions along the way that we can ask each other, figure it out. So it's more of you guys are joining in this conversation with us to help kind of guide. Obviously, you won't be able to respond the way that he's going to be responding to me, but it does give you that ability to. These are some questions that even you guys can answer while we're talking, while we're going through our conversation. So that's kind of how I wanted to start, or want the entire podcast for this episode to be laid out. So it's more of a free talk conversation, kind of like last time, but it's a little bit more guided. We kind of went off the seat of our pants last time. So this time around, we have a little bit of a guideline that we're going to follow. That way we have an intention, a clear intention that we want to accomplish at the end of the podcast today. So what we're going to start with, first of all, Terance, speak, because you haven't spoke the entire time that I've been doing the introduction. So people know you're here that are listening.
Hello, everyone listening. I'm here.
You gotta speak a little louder.
I'm here. I'm here. How you gonna tell me to speak loud? Wow. But once again, Coach Blue, Coach with a K, Blue BLEU. But this is a topic of forgiveness that is one that a lot of us struggle with. But I realize in my family, just the community that I've come from, forgiveness is something that has been a struggle. And then comparing, speaking with others, looking at their family structure and the community they come from, it's a topic, or it's a plague. I'll always look at unforgiveness or unforgiveness as a plague that is throughout the community. We tend to do more sweeping things under the rug than actually forgiving, and then wondering why we can't actually go forward in life with other things, or wonder why some of our relationships get hindered, they don't go far, and we kind of put a limit on how we communicate and have relationships with other people based off of the unforgiveness we have. And sometimes we don't realize we're walking in unforgiveness itself. So this is
How would you describe that feeling
of
unforgiveness? Like walking in it, you said.
yeah, it's because of the fact that a lot of people don't realize they're walking in unforgiveness. I think it goes for, I can say for me, but in the minds of other people, sometimes I wonder if they're looking at it from a standpoint of, it happened, I'll let it go, I'll move forward. And they don't realize that they're still hurt, that they've swept under the rug, and it shows in their actions.
Healed.
They're not fully healed from it, or they haven't fully acknowledged it. I know for me, it was times where I tell people, I forgave it, I'm cool, until I see a picture of the person, or I hear the person's voice, or somebody brings their name up, and now all of a sudden it's just like, whatever, or I roll my eyes.
Yeah.
Or it's like, I don't want to deal with this, I don't want to talk about them, or I dismiss myself from the conversation and just remove, not realizing that those are all signs that I haven't actually forgiven that person. Because when you forgive someone, you don't forget that what they did happened, because you always have to make sure that you keep a boundary, or some type of I don't want to say a wall, but a guard, so you don't allow yourself to go through that again. But you have to in a sense forget it. Like when God forgives us, he doesn't remember our sins. He forgives us as far as the east is from the west. That's scriptural. And we don't realize that when we can't get to that point in a situation, or when we haven't gotten to that point to where it's water under the bridge per se, that it really does hinder how we relate to other people and how it stifles things within our group and our community of other people. Because whether you like it or not, if there's somebody around you that you haven't forgiven and they're still a part of the family,
Tension.
there's still tension.
Yeah, that's a topic for sure. I don't really like having tension around all the time. You don't want to have to live in that. But I would say walking in unforgiveness, I feel like that is just tension, like unnecessary tension.
Mm-hmm.
So like that, I feel like that's maybe the consistent walk. I'm not wording that right, but like just normally,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a little bit of tension, right? And then it builds up the more you experience. Let's say in the example you used, the person, every time you see that person, the tension builds up a little bit, and then there's an emotional reaction. So I feel like that's maybe where we get the walking in unforgiveness. It's just constant or consistent, maybe not constant, but consistent tension at some level
Mm-hmm.
when thoughts of said person comes up. Maybe something like that. That's food for thought. We'll say
It's tension. It's also but that tension can very quickly turn into bitterness. It can very much soon turn into resentment and then anger. And
yeah. So the start would be the tension, and then if it's not dealt with, then it escalates.
it
of
just
course.
escalates. And then it eventually bleeds over into your other relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the danger of unforgiveness is you start persecuting people or holding people accountable for something someone else did. Like I look at it, in my viewpoint, it's kind of like when you go through a bad breakup or a woman and a man have it out and they break up, and then every man that woman dates afterwards is paying for the sins of the man that hurt her the first time.
And vice versa.
And vice versa. It's just that it's a continual repetitive like thing. But when you look at like community, if I see you and I feel like I need to roll my eyes all the time, it just gets to a point of like, why?
Yeah, it's unnecessary energy.
Yeah.
So basically deciding, which is why we're talking about forgiveness, it's like deciding it's not really worth it, because it's unnecessary energy that's expended towards something negative, which means it's just taking away from you. It's just taking away the energy that you can be putting towards something positive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, is it really? And sometimes when there's something that's mildly frustrating to me,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of sit there and I'm like, is this even worth making it a problem? Long term, it's like, is it going to matter 5 years down the line? If it's not, there's not really a point for me even wasting energy on it.
Yeah.
There's some things, like especially traffic, if there's some, which I'm expressive, but I don't really get upset. I'm just expressive, but I think it's fun. Yeah. But that's just me. But something as simple as that, it's just traffic in this sense.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to matter 5 years down the line? No.
No.
What's the point of getting upset? Why do you have to rush to gain 2 minutes of your time? If you really have to save the 2 minutes, leave it and be more accountable with your time.
Yeah.
Like leave earlier.
Yeah.
If anything, that's a you problem. And that's just traffic. Like that's obviously don't
That's
translate that to everything, but essentially it's just small. It's too small of a problem to care.
Yeah.
Because it's just taking unnecessary energy from you.
Yeah.
But anyways, the first kind of line that we have is, what is forgiveness? Because I feel, we were talking about this last night, I feel like a lot of people misunderstand what forgiveness really is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've heard other people experience or voice that when they say that they're forgiving someone, it's, I'm being the bigger person, I'm forgiving this person, right? So I'm trying to be the bigger person, and then I do that just so it goes away.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily the case. And this is what we were talking about last night. What I feel like forgiveness is. I don't remember the exact definition we put to it, but it's forgiving the event or the situation that happened and letting it go so that you can become healed and more yourself. So forgiveness isn't for the other person, it's more for you, right? As a like in a sense of, if I have a situation and something happened to me, I need to forgive the person or the situation. I'm forgiving that for me, not for them, because the discipline of someone else is not really your problem, but your life is your problem, is what you need to handle. So in the event of forgiveness, it's not to make them better or make them feel better, it's to help you heal and you recover and you feel better about that whole situation as a whole, and then you can move on and feel more fulfilled in the things that you do after. That's where that healing. So that forgiveness, I feel like, is a process of healing, recognizing, and we have a little bit of it's like a four or 5 point thing that we're gonna get into that goes through the process that we laid out of forgiveness. But it's that process of recognizing and then letting yourself heal, because usually there's something that's underlying that's in the way.
Yeah.
So as far as like a one statement line for forgiveness, I don't know if I can simplify it that far. If you want to speak on it.
I don't think it can be. It's difficult because,
Well,
for me, I tend to look at things from a very, I guess, a logical standpoint, but then I look at things from a very biblical standpoint at times. Like, we've talked about that. So if I'm looking at, like, one of the definitions for forgiveness that I would give is absolving someone of a debt that they cannot pay.
that's interesting.
Because if I look at it from a biblical standpoint, where God was concerned, he gave his son for us, for our debts, so that we can be forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
But I can never pay him back for what he did.
Right.
So it's forgiveness is for you. Like, forgiveness, if there's ever a time in life to be selfish, it is when you forgive somebody. That's the best time to be selfish, because it's not for them, it's for you. But then it's also, I think for me, it's an accountability of knowing that there are some things that I can't pay back. But even if I look at it from a standpoint of taking God out of that equation, there are things that people have done for me at this point in time in my life that at this moment I physically cannot pay them back. Mm-hmm. And even if I've wronged that person and they've forgiven me, I still may not be able to make good on the damage that I could have caused in their life, but they still forgave me in that standpoint. So it's very, I think forgiveness is one of those things where, because it can be so broad in the different situations we get placed in where we have to start showing forgiveness, it's kind of difficult to put a one line.
Yeah, just the one line definition.
Just a one line definition for
Well, hold on. Let's look at the actual definition first. Like,
Yeah.
Get your phone, and then we'll see what the definition online says, and then maybe we can be like, that's not right. But I'm curious, actually.
So I'm going to, because I have a dictionary and it'll give me.
Well, I guess forgiveness means the absolving of a debt. No, I guess that's technically what it is.
What it is, but I am going to go back. I have an app.
There's an app for that.
There's an app for everything. You find an app to help find your left toenail if it fell off your body at this point in time in life. So, and then my phone decides that it doesn't want to actually pull things up quickly. what that means. I said forgiveness. There we go. So definition is the act or process of forgiving or being forgiven.
But that's not,
But that's not the actual, like,
because then it's
it
just using
means,
the
so
word in the
similar could
definition.
be pardon, um,
So it is. It's
exoneration,
releasing.
remission, which um, mercy, pity, amnesty.
So it's absolving of a debt, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting.
So if we look at it from the biblical definition, it is pardoning an offender, releasing from debt.
An offender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, releasing from debt, similar to counseling a debt. Forgiveness, release the offender from the consequences of their actions. It's a conscientious. It's a consciousness. A conscious choice. Lord. Um, reconciliation.
Okay.
Forgiveness requires repentance, and it's a path of healing.
So it is. It's absolving a debt, which is interesting because in this case, it would be more of an emotional debt or emotional toll that it takes on a specific person.
A second definition of a biblical definition of forgiveness is to condemn the fault but to spare the doer.
Okay, and that takes it to what we were talking about last night, which is the objectivity. Like, it's not about the event, it's about the person.
The person.
It's about the relationship. So that's interesting. So that's a connection there already. How I kind of want to start, well, we already started, but so that's essentially what forgiveness is pardoning a debt, or excuse me, absolving a debt. We'll say relationship wise, right? In this sense, that's what we're talking about. So what I have next is there's like 3 points, I guess. So it's forgiveness started. I believe forgiveness starts before the event happens. So it's like a lifestyle in a sense of what we were talking about. Forgiveness is a lifestyle. It's not something that you do moment to moment. So if you're living in that forgiveness lifestyle, it's more, and this is more of a relation to my life, is I live in a state of forgiveness, which means, and this is how I explain it, or how the best way that I can explain it is, usually when things happen to me, I let them go immediately. Like, there's no part of me that even wants to hold on to that kind of stuff. Whether it's materialistic or whether someone does me wrong or if someone hurts me, I handle it very, very well, and then I go on to the next thing. So it's a state of forgiveness, and it's something that I taught myself a while back when I was learning about forgiveness and like biblical principles, is God forgave us. Well, I don't want to actually put words in my mouth that I don't know are true, but essentially, like, if we ask for forgiveness, we're forgiven, right? And then we change our lives in accordance, which is what repentance is. My idea, or the lifestyle that I live, is before something even happens to me, it's already forgiven in my mind. Now, if you think about it in a deeper sense, it's like, well, how are you forgiving something that hasn't happened? And it's just because I choose not to hold on to those kinds of things, which means when someone does me wrong, I acknowledge it. There's a lesson that I can learn, so I learn the lesson, and then it's absolved, it's healed. Now, back when I was younger, I wasn't able to do that, obviously, so there's things that I have to heal, childhood traumas, essentially. So those things are still being worked through, but as of today and the last few years, when someone does something to me that maybe someone in the world would typically feel some type of way. There's not much that really bothers me, and even my mom brings it up. She's like, "You really don't get bothered by much." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, there's not really a point in most things bothering me."
Yeah.
So I mean, like especially with my car, because it's just one problem after another, which I'm sure you're familiar with too.
Yeah, that's ghetto struggle.
Yeah. So with mine, it's like the AC compressor, and then now there's metal in the system, so we have to do even more work. So it's one thing after another. We were supposed to have it fixed last week, and now it's still going. But like I'm not. It doesn't bother me. I mean, yeah, I've been dehydrated the last few days, but I recognize it now. I'm fixing it for the most part. I mean, this is my second caffeine drink today, but
Wondering why you're dehydrated.
anyways,
You can't say that in front of me, you know. Your nutritionist friend and all of that.
well, nutrition, like technically I am too, but
Yeah.
I think it starts before. But you have to learn how to forgive before you can start learning the lifestyle of forgiveness. So that's why I was like, then I think this is maybe why I wanted to change it up a little when I was talking to you earlier. Like you mentioned, I completely forgot about it. Is because I have the start of it being forgiveness starts before the event. But if you're just now getting into forgiveness and you're just wanting to learn how to forgive or what the process even is of forgiveness, you probably don't want to start before the event, because you already, odds are, if you're beginning to search for forgiveness, there's a lot of stuff you haven't handled with or dealt with from your past.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the starting point. So we're kind of starting at the end, right? Essentially. So we're starting after the event, which is the third point. So we kind of need to go back to the events that happened and why they're bugging.
Yeah.
And then that's going to take us. So we're technically starting at the end of said events because we're present, and then so in a person's perspective, we're at the end of the event because we're present and we're talking about events that have happened in the past, and then we want to solve those so that we can move forward.
Yeah.
And moving forward, that's when you start living the lifestyle of forgiveness. So we're starting at the end. Now, when these events happen, there's typically a sense of betrayal, and that's what makes it stick in your mind, right? Because like as we were talking yesterday, there's events that can happen. The same event can happen, but two different people, you feel two different ways.
Yeah.
One is easier to forgive and go past. The other one sticks with you for years. Okay? Which means can't just be the event, because if it was the event, it would happen every time.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the betrayal, which is essentially the shattering of the way that you felt about the person or the way that you perceived the person. So the person that you have this kind of resentment towards, or the feelings that you have towards this person that they wronged you. I lost my train of thought. Anyways, you have a shattered reality because you viewed them in a certain way beforehand, right? So before the event happened, you had this view of this person, and it was solid, right? So nothing could get through it. This is who that person was to you, and all the signs pointed to that's how that person is. So nothing was wrong. You had a viewpoint of that person. Then the event happens and it shatters, because now you have no choice but to view them a certain way. Like you can't view them the same way because they did something that goes completely against the way that you viewed them in your mind. So now it's shattered.
Yeah.
Right? So now your mind has one view of them, and now your emotions has another view. So something happened. Now that person is a shattered reality. They're no longer the same person that you saw before. And that's where I think the event kind of happens, is now they're not the same person that you saw. And then that's where that all of a sudden those emotions are let's say going crazy. It's not the best view or the best way to word it, but essentially that's kind of what's happening. So they're no longer, let's say, your friend. They're no longer your friend. They're your friend who did something, and now you view them differently because of what they did, depending on what they did. So the process that we're going to try and take a look at, which is forgiveness, is how we can take that shattered reality, find a way to change that story, change that reality, and let you heal from that specific event. Okay, so that's kind of the goal, right? So how can we help others develop a lifestyle of forgiveness? That's the goal. That's the message. Let's see. Another thing I want to talk about just briefly before we get into the 4 points that are really going to take us through everything is it's all, and this is why I say it's a shattered reality. It's all the story that you're telling yourself, right? So the story that you're telling yourself about the situation, or the story that feels true to you, right? And we're going to use feel very specifically because it is how you feel. There's an emotion attached to it.
Yeah.
We need to figure out how to recognize that emotion and see which things are true, which things are not. Now, emotions are true to the person, but they don't it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true to the reality of the situation. And that's what we were talking about last night.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So, I have written down, change your story, change your life. Because if we change the way that the story is viewed in your mind about the situation, then we can change what you do after. So if you have a certain point of view, like a negative point of view, we'll say around this story, let's say we'll put me in perspective. My family, when I was young, they split up, and more times than not, I was alone and my mom was on drugs, right? I could have been like, oh, well, my family was doing drugs and they were drinking all the time. I'm just going to do the same thing. Now, I could take that same story, and it's the same exact story, right? Because it happened. That's my life.
Yeah.
I can choose it to be that story, or I can choose it to be, well, this happened, so I'm going to make sure that I have the best family possible, so that it doesn't happen to my children or my family in the future. Now, the same thing happened to me, right? On a baseline level, the same thing happened. My parents were on drugs. They split up. We had a lot of issues. Same story. The story that I'm telling myself about it is different. It's the ending of the story. It's the emotion that I have attached to that story, right? So in one situation, I can be like, this happened to me, so I'm going to pity myself, and I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to drink. I'm going to do drugs. I'm going to have a horrible family, essentially, because I had that happen to me. So internalizing it, basically. Or I can do what I'm trying to do, and what I feel like I've done a pretty good job of is I'm going to fight to make sure that that never happens to my family in the future. The family that I get to build, that I get the privilege to build. So same story, different meaning, different emotion connected to it, right? So I'm changing the emotion that's tied to the story, and then I'm changing the story itself. So that's kind of how I'm viewing it. That's the viewpoint that I have on this whole layout that we're kind of working on. Do you have anything to add?
I very much so am in agreements with that. Just to kind of elaborate, I had a very, very wise lady by the name of Tiffany Buckner. She has really good books out. But one of the things that she said that has stuck with me is that unforgiveness is a tool of the enemy to turn you into what hurt you. So when you went through your process of what can I do different? And childhood trauma is something that you got to go through and you got to heal. So although you're still on that healing journey, I'm still on that healing journey. It's because we have the perspective of I have to forgive you for myself in that way, per se. You're looking at the narrative to change the story so you don't become what hurt you. You don't become that, if I'm making sense, you don't become that reality then doesn't become your future, like you just said. So it's I guess in my long-winded way of saying it, it's just more of my perspective on that forgiveness aspect and changing the reality is how to use forgiveness and how to use forgiveness as a tool to not repeat that pattern in the same way. Because like for me, I noticed, I can say briefly, I looked at things that happened in my childhood from my dad's perspective in ways that he was like marital promiscuity per se. He's been married multiple times. I held a lot of that unforgiveness for a while, to the point to where I went from relationship to relationship to relationship. Not marital, but I still dated promiscuously, if you say so. Never just was free with my body. And it took that moment of I have to make that change to change the reality. But part of changing that reality was also, I just lost my train of thought. I just pulled to you.
Oh goodness.
I just pulled to you.
Promiscuity.
Was to, as you said, was to what was going to be, I guess, the baseline of what was going to be the baseline to, from the mental aspect of it, not even just from the reshaping of my reality, because that's a part of it. But what was I going to do come back to me. Should have wrote it down as soon as it popped in my head.
Yeah, we got a notebook for a reason.
I know. We'll keep going, and
Okay.
then when it comes back, because
We'll
I'm sure
revisit.
at some point it's gonna weave itself back.
No, but I like that the unforgiveness. What were you saying? The unforgiveness turns you into the thing that you
The
didn't
thing that
forgive.
hurt you.
The thing that hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually kind of really like that, and it does make a lot of sense because the more energy you give something, the more likely you are to turn into that.
Mm-hmm.
So, in this case, all the stuff that's bothering you because you're not forgiving it, you're holding on to it, and it's turning you into that thing.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense in the psychological perspective of giving something your attention, right? So I actually really do like that. Unforgiveness turns you into the thing that you didn't forgive. So, interesting. I'm going to hold on to that. We have 4 points, maybe 5 at the end, but we have 4 points that I want to touch on, and then I want you to ask me questions, help me clarify. If there's something that's not super clear, like pitch in and be like, hey, this doesn't make a lot of sense, or what do you mean by that, right? So ask, and then input, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first point is what I have written down, truth about how you view the situation. Now, what I mean by that is you have to be able to recognize how you feel about it, right? Because you can be angry, but if you never take the time to ask yourself, why am I angry about this? What specifically happened to make me feel this way? We need to dig into that.
Yeah.
Right, and that's kind of starting from the end, like we were talking about a little bit ago. Mm-hmm. So we're starting from after the event, and we're looking back on it. So, how are you feeling about that situation? Why did what happened affect you in a way that made you feel that way? Okay, so we want to get down to the root of that problem. And if you can figure that out, and that's going to be rooted in, you got to ask yourself some questions, and you got to be willing to find that answer. Mm-hmm. You can't just give yourself surface level answers. You got to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Right, so we're going to have to dig into that. So, laying it out, why do I feel this way? What specifically happened to make me feel this way? Mm-hmm. Right? Because, again, your feelings are true. Okay? They're true to the person, right? Mm-hmm. So, prospectively, what you're feeling is true because it's you. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that the situation that happened is true. You just feel a certain way about how you view the situation.
Mm-hmm.
The situation itself could have been something completely different. Now, I'm not saying that it is something completely different, but that just because you feel some type of way doesn't mean it's true. But the feeling itself is true. The situation may not be true to the extent that your interpretation of it, right? So we want to figure out why you feel what you feel and why you feel that way. Then I actually wrote down the next point is why do you feel that way about the situation? So literally we just touched on that.
Yeah.
Why is this bothering me? Why did what they did affect me in such a huge way? What about that? And it could be a deep-rooted process. Like it could be something like we were talking about childhood trauma, right? It could reach back to way when you were younger, and if that's the case, then we have to dig into what about that bothers me, and that's a big rabbit hole. I mean, you have to be willing to spend some time on that, right?
Sometimes investing in a therapist because
it's a rabbit hole.
It's a rabbit hole.
It definitely is a rabbit hole.
When you've gone through it, depending on the circumstance, every circumstance situation is different. Or I should say, every offense is not the same. Like you say, you have someone who lied to you about something, and it irritated you, and it broke your trust or it broke your heart, and you're wondering, like, why is it? And it can be something so simple. Like, I've spoken with people who, short story time, had a boyfriend planned her birthday party. He lied to her about where he was, dates and times, while planning the birthday party for her. It was a surprise. She was upset that he lied to her. So it became a big thing, like a big cry. I can't trust you. I can't believe a word you say. And it's like, for me, I'm sitting there looking at her like, girl, I wish somebody would plan something for me. My people don't even like me. However, it was rooted because her ex lied to her and cheated on her. Her dad lied to her. I'm coming to see you this weekend. She's waiting in the window. He never showed.
Never comes, yeah.
Her mom lied to her. I have your back. I'll always be there. But then when she remarried, she got left with her grandmother. And it was just a continual thing of people telling her, I'm going to be here, I'm going to be here, I'm going to be here. That when he told what we would consider a little white lie, it brought back all of those same things. And she had to literally go down the rabbit hole to her 5 or 6 year old self to figure out why that lie, which is a lie is a lie, a thing is a thing. Like, but why something that we would have considered to not be such a big deal in the grand scheme of things, with him planning something for her was such a tumultuous thing. Like, why in that moment it broke her in a moment per se. So you have to be willing to go down all the hurt and the pain, and sometimes remove the scabs and the unhealed things that have happened to you. So when you say, like, you got to be willing to go down the deep rooted issue, you got to be ready for that.
It's not something you just be lighthearted about, because if you really want to forgive, you're gonna have to start with the things that you still hold on to now. And that, even for me, when I was starting that process, that's a hard thing to do. And it might have started in my life a little bit earlier, but even then, I mean, and it helps that I don't remember the best because I hit my head a lot. But still, that process was a pretty big process for me. Now, it's a struggle when you're going through it.
Oh yeah.
But after you get to the end and you've forgiven and you're moving on, everything after that lifestyle that we're talking about, the forgiveness lifestyle, it's just so much better. Your life becomes so much more fulfilling, and there's so much less that you have to spend energy on. So yes, it sucks in the moment when you're going through this process, but afterwards it's like a miracle. Like your life is just completely changed because you're not holding on to all that stuff anymore. It's a release. All that weight that you keep holding on to yourself, anyone it's a complete release, and then you're free essentially.
Yeah.
So the next point is, what is the truth about the situation from a logical standpoint? So we've dug into the feelings, okay? We figured out, I'm feeling this type of way. I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling betrayed. I understand why I feel that way now. So I went into the deeper process. Now I know why I feel that way. Okay, so now we know why I felt betrayed, why I felt angry, why I felt sad. Now we need to go back to that situation and understand from a logical standpoint what happened, what were the events. So we can get detailed, right, in that event, like this happened, then this happened, then this happened, or we can just have a vague like overview. I went to this block, someone pulled up on me and hit me in the head. I don't know. Yeah. But you can have a vague or you can go into detail. Either way, you want to just take that event that happened and you want to look at it from a logical standpoint, and maybe you can get other people's point of view to open yourself to new perspectives. So now you have more perspectives on that situation, whether it's from people that were in that specific environment when it happened, or even the person themselves, like what their perspective is, and if you want to go that far. I mean, that's completely up to you. So we're learning the truth about that situation in we'll say reality, in the logical facts. What do you have that's factual and that is for sure? Then from that point, once you have that laid out,
well, before we go there, when we think logically, we also have to, I like the fact that you said ask other people's perspectives, because we have to make sure that we're not in a flight or flight thought process to even sit down and logically think about things. Because a person who's dealing with a flight or flight situation, or hasn't exactly been able to bring down their emotions in certain circumstances, especially if it's a long, deep-seated issue that's happened for so long, because flight or flight begins to be something that we operate in regularly sometimes. You operate in that emotion consistently. If you're not at a place to where you've brought that emotion down, you're still not rationalizing things properly. So it's, when we think logically, it's are you in a position to where you know you can logically think about it? And are you going to be honest with yourself to say, if not, and what does that process look like to get to that point? Am I making sense?
Yeah, so it might be even more important in this situation to talk to other people. Like, don't internalize it. Talk to people.
Talk to people.
Even if it's just one other person, get another person's perspective on the outside. Because I think, and this is maybe why I'm able to think clearly on a lot of things, is I take a lot of perspectives in. I don't look at really my own personal perspective. And sometimes I'm even thinking that my perspective is multiple perspectives, because that's just how I think. Like, I'm not thinking of something that happened to me in just one way.
You look at it from different angles.
I'm perceiving it from 5-10 different ways that other people have showed, or that I've learned from other people. Like, these are different perspectives that could happen. Well, it could have been this, it could have been this. There's all these different perspectives, and not in a bad way where it's overwhelming, like I'm controlling those perspectives, but I'm seeing it from different points of view. Like, there's different, I guess, people in my head that are telling me, like, it could have been this, but it also, from that standpoint, there's other things. Because I've been in so many situations where, and this is why communication is so important, the simplest thing could throw someone off balance, and the other person who said it didn't even mean it in that way, right? So if you make a comment, or like I've been doing all day, I've made comments that's quote unquote attacking you, or coming at you, right? If you could get upset about that, but if you don't voice it, I don't know, because I'm just throwing out jokes. But if it does bother you, it's your responsibility. You gotta communicate that with me. Otherwise, it just builds up, and that's where that resentment comes. Right. So we have to have that communication in a general sense, and then that when that happens, you're opening a new perspective for me. Because like, oh, I didn't know that hurt you. I didn't know that affected you that way.
And sometimes it's not even so much as a offense, like, because we joke around, so it's not. I personally wouldn't be offended, but for some people,
Hopefully.
it could be like, well, hopefully you never say anything to offend me. But it's a safety thing. Like, can I feel safe with you? Even though it's not particularly on the topic of forgiveness, but if we just like think about communication, it's can I feel safe enough with you to still voice my opinion? Because that's why some people, like, they already don't speak as it is. But then when you feel like, okay, this person said something, so now I don't feel safe. You didn't hurt me. You didn't technically offend me, but you made me feel uncomfortable. It still skews like that ability for them to even tell you how you may have offended them later on down the road.
You know, it's
if
funny.
there ever is an offense.
That's actually, I'm going to write that topic down because that's part of the communications business that I'm building, is that very thing. And I was talking about it yesterday before I left work, but essentially I was having a conversation with our property manager, or yeah, technically property manager, and she's like, well, it took me however long to feel comfortable voicing, right, to a specific person. And then I was like, okay, I want to challenge that, because for me, I'm going to communicate with everyone no matter what.
Yeah.
I don't care if you don't like me, or if you do like me, or if you're in love with me, or you hate me. I'm going to voice. And I think, and this is what I introduced this idea to her, this perspective, is I'm comfortable enough with myself that if you don't like that I communicate, that's on you. But I know who I am, so I'm going to communicate that to you because it's me. That's my way of communicating, right? And if you don't feel comfortable, and we were talking about vulnerability, and this is where vulnerability, because that's essentially what you're talking about, is vulnerability, right? Being able to feel vulnerable enough to share. I've been told that I'm good with connecting with people, and I believe connection is rooted in vulnerability. And I think, and I'm not positive yet on it, but I think the reason why it's said that I do connect with it really well with people is because I'm willing to be vulnerable at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Because I'm comfortable enough with who I am, and I also don't want you to take vulnerability from a negative standpoint, where it's like, oh, it's my negative feelings that I have, or like that I'm upset about something, because that's what the conversation was yesterday that I was having with my property manager. It was, I don't want you to view vulnerability from that point. It's more of a view of, I'm willing to share my emotions and how I feel about something. Sorry about that. We had a quick 5-minute break.
He had to go.
Breaker. Anyways, going back to the topic. So
we kind of went off topic because we got on vulnerability for a second.
Yeah, we went off topic a little bit, but it is something that I want to touch on, and I want to finish my thought process, or my thought on it. Anyways, I was talking, and I introduced that thought is being comfortable enough with who you are to communicate.
Yeah.
Like, despite what someone else thinks. And it's like solid in who you're, more solid in who you are, that you don't have to sugarcoat or put that mask on in front of other people.
Very
Right.
true. Very true.
So again, like at the end of what I was saying before the break, I tend to be able to connect with other people super easily, right? It's not usually something that I struggle with. I can usually I can build a connection pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I believe it's rooted in the fact that I'm just open and vulnerable. Yeah. And not vulnerable in a sense of I'm miserable, so I'm going to tell you. Right?
Yeah.
Not that kind of vulnerability.
Yeah.
But it's more of my emotions are out there. If I feel happy, I'm gonna show it. If I feel sad, I'm gonna show it. I'm not gonna try and hide. I'm not gonna try and mask it, because for one, it takes so much energy to do that, but also, it's just freeing, like because it's authentic. And I think that's kind of the big thing behind it. The big outlier is being authentic, and that's where that connection comes. So I'm just being vulnerable, and that allows that connection to build. But I'm not gonna hide that connection, or that I'm not gonna not communicate because I don't quote unquote feel safe, because I'm comfortable enough in who I am that what you say is not gonna change that.
I think for some people that's difficult because, like, if we're talking about the topic of forgiveness, they haven't forgiven certain things that happened that didn't allow them to be vulnerable. Like, I can say for myself, I came from, unfortunately, a parental structure that was very old school. Men aren't supposed to show feelings. You're not supposed to express it. Be quiet, sit down, shut up type deal. So by the time I experienced a sexual trauma at 8, I didn't feel safe enough to voice that. So I carried it for a long time until it started to show itself through my actions and patterns and needing therapy. So vocalizing and being open wasn't easy unless I felt safe. But the thing that I guess it was the double-edged sword was, I couldn't actually communicate what was good for me and even be honest with myself about feelings and emotions until I started to heal the trauma of the past.
Right. Well, and by no means is it easy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying what I'm speaking now, it's taken me this long to get to that point. It's not easy to hit, right? I don't want it to sound like I'm speaking about it, but I don't want it to sound like, oh, it's a super easy process. Everyone should do it.
No, it don't even come off that way, because it's a.
No, it takes a lot of effort. I mean, even from my point of view and how I've gotten to that point, it takes so much effort, because you have to be so comfortable with yourself, which not a lot of people are. Like, it takes some effort to be super knowing who you are, and it takes a lot of time. I worded that horribly. It takes a lot of time to really understand who you are as a person, because you have to be willing to shut out all distractions and hear your thoughts and talk to yourself. And that's where a lot of journaling comes in. It's not an easy thing to hit, and I don't want it to come off that way. You said it didn't, but I don't want it to come off like this is super easy. You should do this like right now. No, not at all. I mean, it's a solid process. It's even once I started doing it, or started trying to be intentional towards doing it, it's taken me 4 or 5 years. And I started where I started was, I didn't talk to anyone no matter what. Like, I just stayed quiet unless I had to talk. And that was all throughout high school. So this is even longer. So what, 14? I'm 21 now. So we're going on 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Like, it's not an easy process. And even then, I didn't recognize it until I was maybe 17 or 18. And then I started opening up and being more intentional about it. And the more intentional I've gotten with it, the faster I've grown. Right? Because it's where I've given my most attention. I made more progress the last year than any year combined. It's that exponential progress bar, right? The more you succeed, the more you start to succeed. And it's the same reverse. But it's not an easy process, and I don't want it to sound easy, because it did take some effort. And but it's something that you should shoot for, or I believe you should shoot for, because if everyone was in that sort of a sense, the communities that you build are so much better. The conversations and the relationships you have, even with just friends, it's way, way better, because you're communicating. And you're communicating things that you don't necessarily have to communicate, but it's there.
It's there.
Right? And it's that vulnerability, in a sense of just being able to show who you are, which is your emotions, because you are what you feel.
Emotional. And we try to shut that off so much. And one thing that I've learned is, for me, I've always told myself, I want to be a vessel. I want to be a vessel that God can use to help other people. And in being that vessel, I have to also purposely have to seek out and develop those attributes of God. Say of like the fruit of the spirit. Gentleness, kindness, meekness. I have to be willing to be open. And it's been a journey because I've over the past 3 or 4 years I've been more expressive than I've ever been in my life. And it's come at the fact that I had to be vulnerable. I have to show that I'm happy. I have to show that I'm sad sometimes. Mm-hmm. There are days where I've literally wanted to cry. And that's okay. Because in order to say I want God to use me how and to be that vessel for him, he created us. He gave us our emotions. If we shut that off and don't acknowledge that they're there and aren't honest with ourselves about what's happening, we'll never achieve that vulnerability that we want to be completely transparent in our relationships, especially for those who seek marriage and want to be fathers or mothers one day. You have to be vulnerable with your kids. You have to be vulnerable with your spouse. Mm-hmm. If you can't be vulnerable with the person that you marry, who can you be vulnerable with?
Yeah, you're spending the most time with.
That's
them.
who you're spending the most time with. You wake up with this person. Hopefully you're on good terms. You go to sleep with this person. You're having children with this person. And then even with wanting to help others, how can you help another person if you're not willing to be vulnerable enough to let them know that they can get through the circumstance of the situation? So even in community and connection, as you were speaking about, that vulnerability, you can't build healthy community. To me, you can't build a healthy community without vulnerability.
No, not at all. Because it's all about connection. You can't connect unless both parties or all parties are willing to get themselves closer together. And like I was speaking in men's group, you can't bring more than one person together if you're not willing to have those walls down. And in that sense, if you have your walls up, that's ignorance, right? Because it's and not in the sort of negative tone of like, oh, nothing can get through to you. It's ignorance is definitional. Mm-hmm. It means you're not willing to take in what the information that's being given to you, and then you get frustrated because it's not coming through to you. You don't understand why you don't understand it, and you're not willing to take that time to understand what's going on. And like I was saying, you didn't hear me say this, but I was saying ignorance and vulnerability, they're not exact opposites, but they're pretty damn close, in my opinion, right? Mm-hmm. Because ignorance, you're refusing to let something in and it frustrates you, you get angry. Vulnerability is the opposite. You're willing to be open to everything, even if it does suck. You're willing to be open, and you're taking in that information and you're giving it to other people. Mm-hmm. So it gives that opportunity of connection, and you have to have that, or else your relationship just suffers with anyone. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, whether it's a community or a relationship or friendship. So, now that that's out of the way, right? We talked about that for a little bit. It is very important. Now, we can for sure go into that one. And I really actually enjoy that topic because it's so recent on my heart, and also it's going to be part of the communications business that I am building. Mm-hmm. The last point that we have for forgiveness after telling the truth or learning the truth about the situation logically is that there is a change that happens after that story changes. So you're recognizing you have emotions toward that situation, betrayal, anger, whatever, like whatever you're feeling. Then you understand why you feel that way. And then we move from there and we understand the situation logically. What's the truth logically about that situation? And now we have a change in the story. So the story has changed now, and we have to recognize what that change is. And that changes the way that you view the situation. Now, what we went back and forth on this last night, me and Terance, and we are trying to figure out. Well, we can't just say the change in the story is what the answer is, right?
Yeah.
Because it felt too vague. So we went down the rabbit hole, and the change in the story is the change in your heart.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is now that the story's changed, the emotions that you have associated with it are also changed. So you have to have a change in heart about the situation because now you're viewing it differently. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to the same story that I told earlier. I could have taken the viewpoint of I'm going to go out and do drugs and drink all the time because that's what happened in my childhood and I'm going to pity myself and that's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. Or I can take the path that I've taken and decide that I refuse to have a bad family. I want to build the best family that I possibly can. Yeah. Right? I took the story, I just took a different change of heart. I changed my heart about that story. Now, I'm not saying that my story originally was I'm going to go do drugs and get drunk. Now, had I had troubles with those thoughts early on? Yes. But I had a change in heart of that story and I chose to make it more focused on me building a family that was solid and that I can build something with, right?
But your change of heart allowed you to build an actual foundation that would allow you to build that new, to build the new trajectory, to build that solid family and children up.
What do you mean?
So when we look at changing the heart, one of the things that I look at is God tells us that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Correct. In that particular passage, we're talking about the mind. Mm-hmm. What's in your head? What's in your mind? And having that change of heart, the Bible tells you to. Mind. Yeah, well, it does. That it does. But it also tells you to guard your heart, for out of it flow the issues of life, which is also your mind. Mm-hmm. So that's guarding your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. But that's also going deeper and realizing what, as you heal, because like talking about forgiveness, as you forgive, your mind starts to perceive things differently. And you can, like you said, you could have taken the route of drugs and going down that path, or you could say, what am I going to do to make my family better? So you essentially went into your heart, you went into your mind, and you started to demolish every negative thought, negative feeling, or I'll say you started to demolish the things that you knew you needed to heal from. You started to attack, to break down that old structure. Like, say, look at it as a house. Mm-hmm. You went and you looked at that old home in your mind.
This got to go.
And it's got to go. We've got to demolish this thing. We got to take a wrecking ball to it like Miley Cyrus, and we have to have a blank slate. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you relay the concrete and the foundation, and you're building a new home on newly developed land, to say, these are the buildings, these are the frames that I need to build a stable home. This is the building. This is the sheetrock that I need to build a stable marriage. This is the proper interior flooring to be able to bring children into the family. So as you changed your heart, you started to actually change your, which I don't think we realize sometimes, your viewpoint on what it is, what is family, mm-hmm. What is it to be a father?
Yeah, changing your perspective on the
entire situation. So when we look at healing the heart, we start to actually heal so many different components and different things in our life that weren't necessarily right. Like for me, I never thought, as God started changing my heart, He changed my heart toward my father. So any bitterness and hatred, like for me and my standpoint, and unforgiveness that I had toward him, mm-hmm. started to fade. But I started being able to also look at myself in the mirror and love who I saw. Mm-hmm. Because I look extremely like him. you put us side by side and you would think, outside of the fact that I have a lot of my mother's features, like within my face, I feel like I'm a good even mix, right? But I was always very prominent to see the things in myself of him when I looked in the mirror. And it was hard for me to love myself the way that I wanted to.
Right.
So in forgiving, when my heart started changing and looking at my father with the mind of Christ, because even though like we can thoroughly dislike a person, God still loves this person.
Right.
Like God is still like, you better not touch him. You have to let me. Like vengeance is mine. So anything that needs to happen, any punishment, reprimand, any way that I need to deal with my child, father, friend, ex-girlfriend, whoever it was that's in the, you know, depending on the person, God is going to deal with them. But in that forgiveness, it started to change my heart. And it gave me a new taste for what I wanted and how I saw myself. Like just from a personal standpoint with my thing with forgiveness, is as my heart changed, it was like, no, I actually do love him. Now, do I have to accept the bad behavior? No. Do I have to allow the other things? No. But it changed my heart in the standpoint of even how I view to help other people. I'm less judgy
It's a good
in
thing.
that standpoint. So it goes deeper than just, oh well, I'm changing my heart. How does your heart change, and are you cognitive of how your heart is changing?
It's like understanding.
To understand, like, do you see the ways? Because your verbiage changes, your vernacular changes as you start to heal, and as you have a new heart and a new mind. Your vernacular changes, the way you see things. Like, you get more of an understanding when God said, when people say, are you seeing through spiritual eyes? Like, are you seeing through scriptural? It all starts to change in that part of healing your heart. So I guess my question to you would be, would the heart change, is the heart change conditional? Depending, because it's going to be different depending on the person, but is the heart change, or how can I word this?
What do you mean by conditional? Like why?
Well, no, when I said
Based
that,
on
it was two thoughts coming together.
Okay, I got
So
you.
that's
I
why I
got
was
you.
like,
Yeah, no, you got it.
yeah. Because it is, the heart change is the heart change. It's going to be, how the heart changes is going to be depending on the person.
Depending on the person and the
But
situation.
in the situation, that's why I was like, that's going to be conditional per se,
Right,
because
so-
your situation is different than the next person's.
That's why I wanted, because I don't want it to be too broad, which is why what we said, the change that happens after you change the story, like that's too broad. I want it to be specific enough to where you can take that and apply it to your own life. So that's why the change in heart.
Yeah.
And it's more specific, but it's still broad enough to where we can take it into our own lives. It's like, what's the change that's happening?
The change that's happening.
And because it's going to be different it's going to be different depending on the person and depending on the situation.
Yeah.
So if we both went through the same situation, we're going to take it in differently. It can't be just based on situation, and it can't be just based on the person.
Yeah.
So everyone's going to process things differently. But I think that we can agree, baseline, what happens when that forgiveness starts is after we change that story, it starts in our heart. Our heart changes, our perspective about that situation changes. And now we can start leading into that forgiveness, and essentially, based on the definition, getting rid of that debt that we held on to.
Yeah.
Because in reality, it's not a debt against them, it's a debt on yourself. Because you're the one who's holding on to the weight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we need to get rid of that weight. It's a debt that you're putting on yourself. It's a burden that you're putting on yourself that you don't need. You know what I mean? It's
And you
holding
really
back.
can't carry it. And it was never yours to carry in the first place.
No, because, I mean, long story short, they did it, not you.
Yep.
So we got to get that out of there. We don't need to hold on to that burden. It's not ours to carry.
Yeah.
So that's where that change of heart comes in. That's where we're forgiving the burden. I think we just stumbled upon the actual the definition of forgiveness is forgiving the debt that you held on to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Getting rid of the debt that you held on to yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's personal.
It's a debt.
You're holding on to it.
Yeah.
So I think we outlined, and actually, I'm gonna be honest. We just tackled the beginning of forgiveness, because we tackled how the definition
Mm-hmm.
and the process of starting to forgive. That's after the event. We still have.
Mm-hmm.
We could still tackle the lifestyle of forgiveness, and I think that should be another episode.
I think that should be as well, because the lifestyle of forgiveness,
It's
it sounds like it's an easy thing, but the lifestyle of forgiveness, to actively walk in forgiveness every day, it's a conscious choice.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be willing to take that new heart and that new mind, and you have to be conscious of walking in that every single day.
Oh yeah.
Because as you heal, especially from childhood trauma, the deeper you go with trauma and the deeper you heal, you have to sometimes, and I've said this before, it's like you're peeling off a scab that didn't heal properly, and you're allowing all the infection to bleed so it can heal correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be a situation you go through, and you go to your therapist, or you're speaking to your mental health coach, your counselor, or life coach, and they peel off a scab, and those same feelings that you had before you forgave somebody will be the same feelings that try to come back again. And you have to actively make that decision of, I'm gonna forgive this today, because I forgave you last time.
Mm-hmm.
I forgave you last time. So it's the lifestyle of forgiveness gets easier. It does. Because I don't want anyone to think like, oh my gosh, I'm going to live in a constant state of this. No, it gets easier.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when you don't know how to sing and you go to a vocal coach. Eventually you get
better.
You get better. Hopefully. And if not, singing just isn't your thing. So maybe that was a bad analogy. But it's eventually practice makes perfect. And
practice makes progress. I don't like practice makes perfect. Practice makes progress.
You know what? I like that a little bit better.
Sorry.
Practice makes progress. That's okay. That's okay. Because I just told you earlier, I have to get out of that state of wanting to be perfect. So thank you for that accountability in that. But you get better at it. So it's the lifestyle of forgiveness is one I think that we can go down a rabbit hole on.
Yeah. So today, I think, what forgiveness really is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is absolving the debt that you're holding on to within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Getting rid of that weight. That's what forgiveness really is.
Yeah.
Next time, this is where we say adios. Next time, I think the topic will be trying to live a lifestyle of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can also talk about vulnerability a little bit as well, because I think we can tackle both in the same process. If not, we can have a part 2.
We can.
So it's not a big deal. We have some time coming up. But I think that's a big thing. So diving more into the communication side of things. But as far as this goes, this is, I think, one of the best, if not the best, conversations that I've had so far on this podcast.
You think?
I think this one really tackles a lot. If people listen to it all the way and get to the end of it, I think that it will help a lot of people. So that being said, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate all the support, and having Terance on again. I think he's going to be regular, like I was saying last time. We have a lot of topics that we can go through, and we're thinking pretty hand in hand with everything. So we will catch you guys in the next one.
Over and out.
Awesome.